The train pulled out of Abuja with the kind of energy that carries more than just passengers. It carried excitement, chatter, and the eager pulse of adventure. Tourists leaned against windows with wide smiles, clicking photos of the unfolding horizon, while families on the platform waved until their arms ached, their voices chasing the departing engine. The rhythm of the train felt alive, heavy with laughter, music spilling from someone's speaker, the kind of journey that promised memories. At the next stop, a sea of people waited, parents, children, friends, hearts racing to reunite with loved ones. The platform brimmed with balloons, flowers, and restless anticipation. But when the train screeched into view and the doors hissed open, a chill swept through the crowd. Every seat was empty. Bags sat untouched, phones still charging, coffee cups half drunk, a jacket draped carelessly over a chair. The air felt wrong. Too quiet, too hollow, as if life itself had been plucked from the carriages. The shock deepened when staff reached the driver's cabin. No one was there. The controls glowed faintly, the train moving as if guided by some unseen hand. By the time it rolled silently into Lagos, the uproar had erupted into chaos. Families screaming, police swarming, cameras flashing. The platform became a storm of grief and disbelief. Hundreds of lives had vanished without a trace, leaving only possessions and questions. The haunting silence of the train whispered the one mystery no one could answer. How can so many people disappear into nothing?
Welcome to Echoing Tales, where horror lingers and mysteries whisper. Subscribe for chilling stories, true crime, and the eerie unknown. Now turn down the lights and let's step into the story.
The ringing of the phone sliced through the hum of the late afternoon station, its shrill tone bouncing across the cramped walls of the duty office. Detective Omar Obinna reached for it with his usual calm, but the voice on the other end stripped him of composure almost instantly. The words tumbled fast, frantic, almost incoherent. An entire train, no driver, no passengers, only belongings left behind. Omar's brow furrowed, his pen frozen above his notepad. At first, he thought it was a prank, something cooked up to stir fear, but the tremor in the caller's voice told him otherwise. His chest tightened, his instincts prickling with unease. This was not a routine call. He grabbed his coat and badge, muttering something about checking it out himself. The Abuja station was only a short drive away, but the closer he got, the louder the sirens became, the thicker the air felt with panic. By the time he stepped out his car, the scene was already a knot of confusion. Police cordons straining against a restless crowd, families shouting, tears staining cheeks, the chaos of disbelief echoing off the metal skeleton of the station. Plus moved past the uniformed officers, his badge flashing briefly. His eyes scanned the platform, the sleek shape of the train looming like an abandoned beast. Its carriages stood open, possessions sprawled in seats, as though their owners had merely stepped away for a moment. But there was no trace of them, no footprints beyond the usual traffic, no blood, no struggle, just absence, raw, chilling absence. He walked slowly down the length of the train, each step heavier than the last. In one seat, a half-eaten sandwich sat beside an open travel journal, the words stopping mid-sentence. In another, a little girl's stuffed rabbit stared up at him, its button eyes unblinking. Omar swallowed hard, his hand brushing the fabric as though touching it would explain the unexplainable. Detective, an officer hurried over, sweat glistening on his forehead. Families are demanding answers. We've searched the cabins twice. Nothing. Nothing is impossible, Omar murmured, his gaze drifting to the driver's cabin. He stepped inside, finding the controls quietly lit, the system running without error. Yet the seat was empty, untouched, as though the driver had vanished mid-breath. His mind clawed for logic. Could they have disembarked? Been evacuated somehow? But then where were they now? He turned back toward the crowd, deciding to gather voices. At the barrier, a woman clutched her phone to her chest, her face pale with shock. "Detective," she gasped when he approached. I spoke to my sister while she was on the train, just 10 minutes before it arrived. She was laughing, describing the countryside. And now, her voice cracked. She's gone. Others pressed in with their stories. A young man insisted he saw silhouettes through the window as the train slowed. But when the doors opened, the carriages were barren. Another swore he heard music, an Afrobeats rhythm, from one of the compartments seconds before silence fell. Each account twisted the mystery tighter, feeding Omar's growing unease. As the sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the steel tracks, Omar stood in the middle of the chaos, a knot of questions swirling in his mind. This wasn't merely disappearance, it was erasure. Something had happened in transit, something that left no trace but belongings and sorrow. And as the night crept closer, Omar knew this was only the beginning. Whatever had taken those passengers was not done yet. Back at the station, Detective Omar sat hunched over his desk, the dim glow of his monitor illuminating his tired features. The noise of the day still echoed faintly in his mind. The wailing families, the empty train, the stuffed rabbit abandoned like a tombstone of innocence. But now he needed clarity, not emotion. He typed quickly, pulling up the digital rail maps, tracing the bold blue line that stretched from Abuja to Lagos. Every stop was marked neatly, a series of dots strung together across the landscape like beads on a cord. He leaned closer, rubbing his temples as he read the timetable. The train had departed Abuja at precisely 9:15 a.m., scheduled to make 6 stops before Lagos. He replayed the testimonies in his head. Families had seen loved ones boarding at Abuja. Some passengers had disembarked at the smaller stations, waving goodbye or disappearing into the crowds. That meant, at least for the first stretch, there had been people inside. So where, between the last confirmed sighting and Lagos, had the train become a ghost ship? He decided to see it with his own eyes. At the first stop, he spoke with weary ticket clerks and station guards. They confirmed passengers had stepped off, laughing tourists dragging suitcases, locals shouldering bags of goods. He checked the CCTV footage, grainy, but clear enough to show the bustle of life as the train paused. Smiling faces, children darting through the crowd, all perfectly normal. The second and third stops told the same story. At each one, Omar interviewed staff, asked to see surveillance, studied the timestamps. The train arrived, passengers exited, others boarded. The carriages buzzed with activity. On one camera, he even caught a glimpse of the stuffed rabbit clutched tightly in the arms of a girl who had still been on board after the third stop. His stomach twisted, because he knew by the time the train rolled into Lagos, the rabbit would be alone. It was at the fourth stop, just before the long, uninterrupted stretch toward Lagos, that unease truly set in. Omar studied the platform footage with hawk-like focus. The passengers were there, clear as day, leaning against windows, some stepping off briefly to buy water, others waving to vendors before reboarding. Nothing strange, nothing violent, and yet, something gnawed at him. The people were there, right until the train door shut and the whistle blew. After that, no one saw them again. He leaned back from the monitor, his jaw tight. The train had been full of life up until that last stop. Between there and Lagos, something had occurred, something vast enough to erase nearly everyone aboard. But how could an entire train full of people vanish without a trace, without screams, without signs of struggle? He returned to his car, sitting in silence, the cool night air leaking through the cracked window. His notebook lay open on the passenger seat, a messy collection of observations and half-formed theories. He tapped his pen against the page, circling the phrase that seemed to taunt him. Abuja to Lagos, somewhere in between. The stretch of track was empty countryside, dense forests, open fields, and long bridges with no settlements nearby. No place for hundreds to disembark unnoticed. No way to vanish so completely. As Omar stared at the map glowing on his phone, one thought settled in his chest like a weight. Whatever happened didn't occur at a stop. It happened in motion. Somewhere between Abuja and Lagos, the train had carried its passengers into silence, and he was determined to find out what waited on that line. Detective Omar sat alone in the quiet of his office, the faint hum of the ceiling fan doing little to clear the heaviness in the air. The train map lay sprawled before him, its neat lines now a mockery of logic. He had combed through stops, questioned staff, scrutinized the ghost-like CCTV footage, yet the mystery only deepened. If the passengers had indeed vanished between Abuja and Lagos, then perhaps the key was not in where they disappeared. But why? With a sigh, he reached for his phone and dialed the tourist company that had organized the group bookings. His voice was clipped, direct, though the fatigue underlined every word. "I need contact details of the families who were expecting their loved ones in Lagos." Now, the manager on the other end hesitated, stumbling over bureaucratic excuses, but Omar's tone cut through until the information was sent. A long list of numbers, names, and notes slid into his inbox. He began calling them one by one. The first was a woman in Lagos who broke down almost instantly when she heard his voice. Between sobs, she told Omar her husband had been an importer, running a modest but thriving business. Not wealthy enough to make headlines, but comfortable. He had taken a trip with hopes of enjoying a rare break from work. The second family's story was similar. A young man, a software developer, well-paid, stable, traveling for leisure. Omar's pen scratched across his notepad, circling the word comfortably wealthy. Family after family answered his calls. The details varied. Some were small business owners, others professionals in law, medicine, or trade. A few retirees who had built up healthy savings accounts. None of them were billionaires or high-profile figures, but none of them were struggling either. Each had enough to be considered valuable, enough to catch the attention of someone searching for leverage. By the fifth call, Omar's gut began to tighten. The pattern was too clear to ignore. When he asked why their loved ones had chosen this particular holiday, the answers almost blended into one another. It was meant to be a reward trip. They needed a break. They could afford it now. We thought it was safe, organized. Every single missing passenger had been well off. Not extravagantly, but consistently. Enough money for ransom. Enough assets to be useful bargaining chips. Omar leaned back in his chair, pinching the bridge of his nose. Could this have been no supernatural vanishing, no freak accident, but something calculated, an operation with chilling precision? He replayed the scene of the empty train in his mind. If it had been hijacking, where were the signs? How could so many be removed without leaving so much as a footprint? He redialed the tourist company, this time demanding details about who had sold the packages, who handled the bookings, whether the same agent had arranged them all. The representative stuttered, but admitted a bulk deal had been managed by a single operator, someone new. Omar scribbled the words down, his pulse quickening. His notebook now bore a grim sketch. Rich but not rich enough to fight back. Comfortable but not untouchable. Tourists clustered together by design. He closed his eyes for a moment, the voices of grieving families ringing in his ears. This was not a coincidence. This was not by chance. This was a net, and every passenger had been caught because they were worth something. Not their lives, but their value. Omar opened his eyes, hardening his jaw. If ransom was the motive, then someone would be making demands soon. And when they did, he intended to be ready. Detective Omar stood in front of the frosted glass door of his superior's office, his knuckles tapping twice before pushing it open. The air inside smelled faintly of stale coffee and the sharp tang of ink. The desk stacked high with reports from other cases. His boss, Commissioner Musa, looked up from a pile of paperwork, his stern face softening slightly at the sight of Omar. "You've been quiet since the call came in," Musa said, gesturing for him to sit. "What do you have for me? Any progress?" Omar didn't sit right away. He placed his notebook on the desk, its pages scribbled and circled with frantic handwriting. "Sir," he began, his voice low but steady, "this isn't what it looks like on the surface. It's not some supernatural vanishing, not a ghost story. I've spoken to families, cross-checked with the tourist company. Every missing passenger had something in common. They were financially comfortable. Not billionaires, not untouchable elites, but wealthy enough to matter. Wealthy enough to be ransomed. Moose's eyes narrowed, his fingers drumming lightly against the desk. Ransom? Then where are the demands? Where are the messages, the calls? That's the question, sir, Omar replied. The how, not just who or why. They've been taken. I'm sure of it. The train wasn't emptied by accident. It was emptied. The only mystery left is how. For a long moment, Musa said nothing, only staring past Omar at the blinds where thin blades of sunlight cut across the room. Finally, he leaned forward. Find out, he said, his tone clipped and heavy. If this is organized crime, then whoever pulled this off just humiliated every branch of law enforcement in this country. I want answers, Obina. Fast. Omar nodded once, pocketed his notebook, and left. He knew exactly where to go next. The Abuja train station manager was a man named Al-Yamide, a stout figure with a receding hairline and the kind of politician smile that appeared only when necessary. Omar arranged a meeting, insisting it be private. They sat in a cramped conference room on the station's second floor, a fan rattling noisily above them. Mr. Al-Yamide, Omar began, placing a recorder on the table. I want to know everything about the train that departed on the Abuja-Lagos line yesterday morning. Who authorized it, who drove it, and why we now have over 100 missing people. Al-Yamide shifted uncomfortably in his chair, tugging at his collar. Detective, as I've said already to your officers, we are investigating. We do not yet have all the answers. That's not good enough, Omar pressed. The driver, where is he? Why wasn't he found on board? The manager's lips tightened. We are still checking. The records will reveal his schedule. Don't play games with me. Omar snapped, his patience fraying. A train does not run itself. Someone drove it out of the station. Either you know who, or you're hiding who. Al-Yamide glanced at the door, his knee bouncing beneath the table. Detective, I cannot speculate. This is an ongoing matter. Every answer was shorter than the last, clipped and evasive, as though the man was more afraid of revealing too much than of concealing the truth. Omar pushed harder, asking about maintenance logs, about passenger counts, about why CCTV from the platform was mysteriously missing a 30-second window during departure. Al-Yamide's responses were thin, like brittle paper stretched over stone. Finally, the manager stood, adjusting his suit. I've told you what I can, he said stiffly. Excuse me, I have duties to attend to. Before Omar could press again, the man was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. For a moment, the detective sat still, the whir of the fan filling the silence. Then his eyes drifted around the room. The table was bare save for a few scattered pens, but on the cabinet near the window, a corner of paper protruded from beneath a stack of files. He rose, curiosity tugging him forward, and pulled it free. The document was crisp, official, stamped with the logo of the Nigerian Rail Authority. His eyes scanned the heading. Operational Manifest, Abuja-Lagos Line, Train 77. It listed specifications, schedules, driver assignments. But what froze him was the line near the bottom. 2 entries, 2 versions. Train 77A, departure 9:15, Abuja to Lagos. Train 77B, departure 9:15, Abuja to Lagos. His breath caught. 2 trains, the same number, the same departure, identical manifests, yet differentiated by a subtle suffix. He flipped through the attached pages, his heart pounding louder with each turn. The details diverged slightly, different driver IDs, different maintenance logs, different crew notes. The records weren't mistakes. They were deliberate. 2 versions of the same train had been logged as leaving Abuja that morning. Omar gripped the paper so tightly it crinkled. If one train was the one that arrived in Lagos empty, then where had the other gone? Could it be that the passengers hadn't vanished at all, but had been diverted elsewhere, shifted to a second line, hidden from sight? The idea struck him with both terror and hope. If they had been taken alive, then they were somewhere, still breathing, still reachable. His eyes darted to the door where Al-Yamide had stood moments ago, spouting evasions. The man hadn't been nervous because he knew nothing. He'd been nervous because he knew everything. Omar folded the document carefully, sliding it inside his jacket. The fan above rattled louder, like an omen, as he whispered to himself, "They're not gone. They've been moved." And if that was true, then this case had just shifted from a mystery to a hunt. A hunt that could lead him straight into the shadows of whoever had orchestrated this impossible theft of lives. The night bled into morning as Detective Omar traced the paper trail from the duplicate manifests, his eyes red, but burning with determination. Every lead pointed not to the open track between Abuja and Lagos, but to a diverging line, a hidden spur that split off from the main rail. It wasn't marked on tourist maps, not even on the public schedule, but there it was in the operational logs, a service route used only for cargo. His gut told him this was where the answers lay. By dawn, he and a small tactical unit were in motion, following the rusted rails into the countryside. The sun rose slowly, spilling pale gold across thick vegetation and lonely stretches of land untouched by the bustle of cities. The rails cut a quiet path into silence until, at last, they reached it. A weather-beaten cabin set against the trees, its walls sagging but reinforced with new locks. Omar's hand went to his holster as he signaled his men forward. The door gave way with a crash, and what they found inside stopped them cold. Rows upon rows of people, men, women, children, sat bound hand and foot on the dusty floor, their mouths gagged with strips of tape. The same faces that had laughed, sung, and waved goodbye only days ago now stared back at Omar with eyes wide from terror and exhaustion. Some whimpered against their restraints. Others simply sagged with relief as uniforms filled the doorway. "Clear the room. Get them out," Omar barked, his voice fierce but cracking with emotion. Officers rushed in, cutting bindings, pulling tape from mouths, lifting weakened bodies into waiting arms. The air filled with sobs and gasps, the kind of sound that was half agony, half gratitude. A young girl clutched her rabbit once more, tears streaking her face as she clung to her mother's neck. But the room was otherwise empty. No guards, no perpetrator, only the victims, and one single sheet of paper left atop a wooden crate at the center of the floor. Omar approached it slowly, the note written in jagged, hurried handwriting. "You got me this time, but don't worry, you'll see me again." His jaw clenched as he read it again, each word dripping with challenge. Whoever had orchestrated this had slipped through his fingers deliberately, leaving the victims alive as if to taunt him, to promise more to come. The rescued passengers were ferried out, some rushed to hospitals for dehydration and injuries, others wrapped in blankets and reunited with weeping families. The scene outside the cabin swelled with flashing lights, medical teams, and reporters who had already caught wind of the miracle recovery. Yet behind the relief, the shadow of the unanswered loomed large. As Omar stood by the door, watching paramedics lift a frail old man into an ambulance, his boss Musa arrived, his face grim. "You did good," Musa said quietly. "You saved them." Omar shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the note clutched in his hand. "No, sir. We found them, yes. But the one who did this, he's still out there. He wanted us to find them. He wanted us to know this was only the beginning." The morning sun burned brighter, but to Omar it felt like a cruel spotlight, exposing just how vulnerable they all remained. The passengers were home, the nightmare temporarily ended, but the predator was free, watching, plotting his next move. And Omar knew one thing with terrifying certainty. The hunt was far from over. Thank you for watching Echoing Tales. Subscribe, ring the bell, like and share. Stay tuned, because the next mystery is already calling.